Hello and welcome back to the Out of the Park Development's YouTube channel. My name is Alex Murray, also known as AZ Axel. We have covered batting, we've covered running, and we've covered fielding. And today, in our tutorial for the day, we will be covering pitching. All the pitching ratings and all the different areas that you need to know about your pitchers and how to read them. And if you have your OOTP 22 games open, let's jump right in and let's get started. Alright, so let's jump right into our review of pitchers. As you can see, we're going to be using Charlie Morton as our example for this afternoon. And the first place that we're actually going to be starting is the one thing I've hidden, and that's going to be stuff. We're going to talk about what stuff is for a starting pitcher and relief pitcher, because for all pitchers, it's the same thing. Stuff is the rating that indicates for your pitcher how often batters in this case, are not going to make contact because of how good stuff is. And stuff is a combination. That rating is a combination of the pitches, so the arsenal that this pitcher has and brings with them. So in this case, Morton's got a fastball, sinker, cutter, slider, splitter, and a knuckle curve. And all of those pitches plus his velocity, which is 95 to 97, all of that is resulting in a 60 over 60 out of 100, I believe. No, actually, that's out of an 80. This is a 20 to 80 scale. So a 60 over 60 stuff rating. And again, stuff is an indication of how often or how well a pitcher is able to prevent any contact from being made. So it's all about strikeouts. This is all about strikeouts. So for example, Randy Johnson would have had an 80 over 80 stuff with an amazing fastball, some of the best velocity in the league, with a very good slider and probably a workable changeup. That's a good example of that right about there. So Morton doesn't exactly have the best pitching arsenal, although I think it's still pretty gosh darn good when you have 50s and 60s. But his velocity definitely keeps him up there with the best of the best, and he'll be able to reduce a whole bunch of the contact being made, which is what's going to result in all of these very nice K per 9 inning numbers from people such as Morton. So if stuff is all about strikeouts and limiting contact, what is movement and control? Movement is going to be for pitchers when contact is made. When a pitcher does allow contact, if this is a very low movement pitcher, the contact made is very good. It's going to result in a lot of additional hits in terms of doubles, triples, and home runs, unfortunately. So you want to make sure that if your pitcher can't get everybody out with limited contact, you're going to want to make sure the movement, make sure the contact made is going to be weak. So if you don't have good stuff, make sure you have good movement at least. Control is going to be all about preventing walks, being able to hit their pitches exactly where you want them. Now, I wish it did a little bit more than just simply limit your walks and allow you to have shorter at-bats for batters, be able to have, less pitches thrown by the pitcher. But it is in combination with your stuff and movement to result in how your pitcher handles every single at-bat. So you want to make sure that, your pitcher is not throwing pitches all over the zone because their control is so bad and they give free bags to players. So keep that in mind. Now, one thing to talk about velocity before we move on from that in regards to stuff. As your player ages, from when they are first drafted, and if they're very young, if they're a high schooler and even a college player, so if they're down amongst the teenage years up into their 20s, they will be able to have the opportunity to gain velocity as they go through your development system. So you can see a person or a player be able to gain stuff rating as they get older, as they gain more velocity. So don't be afraid to draft somebody who has average stuff if they're only throwing the ball 89 miles an hour, but they're 18 years of age. They may be able to develop a little bit more velocity as they get older, and then that stuff turns into 60, 65, and 70. You could suddenly get an ace pitcher out of nowhere if they gain a few miles per hour. Movement and control can also get developed over a course of a regular season. Again, development we'll talk about later, guys, so don't worry about that. We'll cover that. There is always a way to be able to gain potential for these players as well as current ability to make your pitchers better. But always keep in mind that stuff, especially, can be very fluctuating if your player can gain some velocity. Now, let's talk about ground ball, fly ball tendency, which is the one right here. This ground ball fly ball tendency, apologies about my voice, is going to be an indication of what type of contact your pitcher gives up when he does give up contact. In this situation, Charlie Morton is a ground ball pitcher. A lot of his pitches are going to dive in. They're going to be moving all over the plate. You know, his fastball, I believe, in real life moves. His sinker, his cutter, his slider, his splitter, his knuckle curve. Lots of movement pitches. He doesn't throw the ball straight and hard. He throws it to move. He wants it to be able to dip and dive, and batters can't hit it well. So his ground ball pitcher tendency means that when somebody makes contact, it's most likely than not going to be a ground ball. Now, there is extreme ground ball pitcher as well, and those are highly prized, because here's the deal. When a ball is hit on the ground, unless your defense is terrible, there's a very good chance it's only going to result in, at worst, a single and maybe a double. When you have a fly ball tendency pitcher who has low movement, so the contact is very good and it's very much a fly ball, the worst it can be is a home run, or a double, or a triple. So what would you rather have? A bunch of singles, or a bunch of extra base hits and home runs? So a lot of people in OOTP will avoid high fly ball pitchers for that particular reason alone. All right, so Charlie Morton, highly prized pitcher right here because he's a ground ball pitcher and he has high velocity and decent enough movement at 55 to be able to have weak contact when he does give up contact. Now, your arm slot is going to be an indication of how well they handle left versus right batters. As they go further and further down in terms of being a submariner, you know, you go from basically straight overhead to 3/4 to sidearm and then submarining. And I don't even know if Charlie Morton is exactly per se sidearm. I think he's more 3/4 to sidearm. But that's going to be an indication of how well the splitting batter is able to read your pitches. So, for example, if I can see it here, yeah, you can see Morton not very good against lefties, very, very good against righties. And that's because of his arm angle, much more readable for lefties than for righties. For righties, it's coming right at them. You know, it's literally lined up with their body versus lefties, where it's coming from way out and over and they can see it. They can read the pitch all the way in. So, just watch out for that. You might see someone you really like, and then you go to these splits and you see that they're terrible against one of the batters. You know, they're bad against lefties or righties, and you wonder why. It might be because of their arm slot. Now, power pitchers, finesse pitchers, ground ball pitchers, those are all for like coaches. We'll talk about those later. But right now, in this example, Charlie Morton is a power pitcher. You would want a power coach, a power pitcher coach, to be able to teach him pitching, and he would have more development with a power pitching coach. All right? We'll talk about that later. Now, the last two things. Stamina, hold runners, and then we'll talk about relievers versus starters. Okay? Stamina is going to be how long a pitcher can last in a ball game. Now, starters do not need more than 25 stamina to be constituted as a starter. Okay? That's the game's definition. However, the game recommends in our manual 50 is the minimum that you really should be throwing as a starter for stamina. And I agree. 45 is cutting it close. 40 is really cutting it close. But anywhere between 45 and 55 is acceptable. At least in my opinion. All right? That's my advice about that. Because here's the problem. If your pitcher can only manage to go 5 innings, and by the end of that he's tiring, he's going to really hurt your bullpen. And your bullpen's going to get more of their arms used, and potential for injuries are going to increase because of that. So just be aware that your stamina is a huge way to be able to give your bullpen breathing room and also prevent your starter from getting into injury situations, because the more they burn themselves out every single day, the higher the injury chance goes over the course of the regular season, and they get more and more innings pitched. Okay? The game does factor that into the situation. All right, hold runners. Hold runners, as I mentioned in the last video with running, is how well your pitcher can keep a runner closer to a bag and not have them take a large lead. This will help them be able to withstand stolen bases coming against them. Morton, in this example, is above average at 50. He's not too bad. He will still see some people run on him, but he will be able to hold a lot of people in check because of the fact that he has a unique delivery or in this, well, in real life, he has a unique delivery that allows him to keep people from getting too good of a jump on him. Now, that again is in conjunction with your catcher arm to compare against the runner's stealing and speed ability to see if they steal a base off of you. All right, let's wrap it up by talking about relievers and starters. Now, starting pitchers are base what you're seeing right here. Everything that you're seeing, this is exactly what you get. For relief pitchers, if we change Morton to a relief pitcher, and I think this will work. Nope, it didn't, but that's okay. I can use an example later. Relief pitchers get a stuff boost because of the fact that batters are not going to see them multiple times over the course of a game. Our manual states it a whole lot better than I'm going to right now, but basically that's what happens. Relief pitchers are always going to get a slight marginal stuff boost because of the fact that they can put all of their effort into one inning or 3 batters. That's normally a relief pitcher's job, is to focus on 3 batters, get an inning done, and hand it off to the next person. Whether or not they're a setup, a stopper, or a closer. Their job is to focus on a smaller piece of the game versus a starter who needs to go 5, 6 plus innings. All right? For relief pitchers, everything else is the same. In terms of it being high movement, you want high movement. You want high control. You want to be able to see ground ball pitchers if you can see them. Now, one thing to note about ground ball, fly ball tendencies, and I forgot to mention this, and we'll end here because that's pretty much it. That's the only difference between starters and relievers is the requirement of stamina. You don't have to have a whole lot of stamina to be a relief pitcher, and the stuff boost that comes with being a reliever. So you could convert somebody from a starting position to a reliever, and they would perform better as a reliever than they would as a starter if their stuff is perfectly aligned just for that position. Now, let's talk about the last thing. Again, ground ball, fly ball tendency. One thing to note, guys. Having a fly ball tendency pitcher is not the end of the world. Okay? What you need to do is if you have a pitcher that you have drafted and you didn't know that they were a fly ball tendency pitcher, don't freak out about it. You're okay. Just make sure they have high movement. If they have high movement, here's a cool little tip. It's a lot easier for balls in play to be an out when they're a fly ball than when they're a ground ball. Catch that? When you have a ground ball pitcher like Charlie Morton, but if your defense behind him on the infield is trash and it's not good, all those ground balls he's putting into play, you're going to get a lot of singles because the defense won't be able to make anything of it. Outfielders make plays more often than infielders do. So the chances are that if you have a pitcher with a fly ball tendency and high movement, they will have what is recorded as a lower BABIP than a pitcher who's a ground ball pitcher but has similar movement. Okay? A fly ball pitcher will get more outs, more guaranteed outs than a ground ball pitcher will. But, again, fly ball pitchers have a tendency to give up extra base hits versus ground ball pitchers who have a tendency to give up singles. So something to chew on right there. Keep that in mind, guys, and make sure that you guys are always watching out for stuff like that. So, hopefully, all that information about pitchers, guys, helps you figure out exactly how to read these pitcher pages that we looked at just recently here, and also what to look for when you sign young pitchers, as well as develop your pitchers in your organization. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll have many more videos just like this right down the road in the future. I'll talk to you all later.